Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I call myself the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and today I'm going to talk to you about a really exciting topic as it relates to adrenal fatigue. It's really interesting because I talk about adrenal fatigue and all of the different health ailments that are consistent with an adrenal fatigue problem. And then it becomes like Forrest Gump when he is making his shrimp and he has all these different recipes, 1,001 different recipes for shrimp. I feel the same way about adrenal fatigue in terms of adrenal fatigue and insomnia, adrenal fatigue and hypoglycemia, adrenal fatigue and insulin resistance, adrenal fatigue and gut health, adrenal fatigue and gluten sensitivity, adrenal fatigue and heavy metal toxicity, adrenal fatigue. I mean, anything you can think of in terms of having a health ailment, you can link back to adrenal fatigue. And why is that? It's because we get stressed. And when we say stressed, I don't just mean, oh my goodness, I'm stressed out, I have bills to pay, and I have relationships that are giving me stress, or jobs, or whatever. I'm talking about just environmental stress. Environment is anything but yourself. And when that environment interacts with your body, you have to process that. So when I do these Facebook Live sessions, my goal is to give you these videos and tell you that adrenal fatigue is completely different than what you think it is. And I want to give you a whole new paradigm shift at looking at adrenal fatigue from a sideways kind of angle and make you scratch your head and think, oh my goodness, I had no idea all of those things were related to adrenal fatigue. The irony is that all of those things are related to adrenal fatigue, but there's so much more going on in the body besides just adrenal fatigue. There are system issues like your gut health and how you can break down foods. And then there are these sympathetic permanent triggers that cause you to have anxiety and be shaky and lightheaded and not being able to focus and concentrate and not being able to get a restful sleep or not being able to calm down or not being able to enjoy things and have pleasure. There's a lot of relationships where when we get stressed out and we can't handle all of the things that are being that are coming at us at, over and over repetitively with the society that we live in, then ultimately we start to break down. And that's where you're not bouncing back the same way. That's where you used to be able to what's the word, I guess, multitask. You used to be able to have two jobs, you have two kids, you were learning, you were studying, you were adventurous, you were going out socially, you were passionate, you were having deep, meaningful relationships, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And you weren't able to do that, and you wanted to isolate yourself in bed, and you didn't want to go out, and you didn't feel sexy, and you're not able to drop the weight, and you're not able to even just do basic things like focus and concentrate, and where did I put my car keys, and oh no, I got to get up, the alarm clock already went off, and I haven't slept a wink, and I'm exhausted, and the more I sleep, the more I'm tired, or I'm achy and sore all over the place. And then the worst of it is I go to the doctor, and they tell me that nothing's wrong. They're saying there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. Your blood tests are normal. You're a hypochondriac. Maybe you should get on antidepressant medication, or maybe you should just start exercising and eating healthy. Like when you look at the doctor and they could stand to maybe lose a little bit of weight themselves and start exercising themselves, they're not coming from a place of integrity and authenticity, and they're judging you and they're dismissing you, and they got to see the next person because they don't have time to talk, and they don't have time to get into what's wrong, and they don't have time to do specialized tests that they have no idea what it is. I know a little bit pessimistic, but I think that's the way it works nowadays. Is that it's this pharmaceutically driven, insurance-based healthcare model where you don't sit back and listen and talk to people and find out what's going wrong with them and try to put a plan together and try to identify what the weak links are and try to look at the system as a whole. And that's the other problem is that we have these specialties in medicine where you have the endocrinologist, your rheumatologist, gastroenterologist, neurologist, pain management, anesthesiologist, pathologist. You have all these ologists, and no one's talking to each other. And then the thing is the body is always talking to each other. The cells are talking to each other. And when we take that individualized, specialized, customized type of medicine approach, we forget that the body is a generalized system. And when the system breaks down and the blood tests don't actually show it, and that's the amazing thing. I get a lot lot of patients that their blood tests look great, but on the inside, they're a wreck. They have a lot of oxidative stress. They're not absorbing their nutrients. Their adrenals and their hormones are not balanced. They don't have energy. They need to take cat naps during the day. And guess what? Their blood tests are normal. And the doctor thinks that they should just go and exercise and eat healthy and maybe take some Prozac and everything's good. So anyways, I'm fired up here. So today I want to talk to you about adrenal fatigue and hypoglycemia and insomnia. So whenever I have an adrenal fatigue patient, my first thing is to think they probably have some blood sugar issues. Specifically with me, I suffered with adrenal fatigue probably as early as 14, 15 years old. I remember going to track meets. I ran cross country, and in the bus, on the bus ride to the school where we would compete against, I just had the worst anxiety. And I didn't realize that till about 3 or 4 years ago that that's what it was. I got these butterflies. I was always anxious. I was getting shaky, lightheaded, and jittery if I didn't eat a meal. I waited long times during the day where I hadn't eaten. I was an anxious, stressed kid. And then I would eat a lot of bagels and breads and sugary foods and not a lot of healthy fats and probably not as much protein as I needed. And that's what we're seeing nowadays, is we're seeing that most people that have these adrenal issues are deep-rooted hypoglycemic problems that stemmed from childhood, and they never learned how to have a balanced meal with a healthy protein, a healthy carb, a healthy fat, what time of the day your body's more sensitive to insulin versus other times of the day. They never learned this stuff. And so we've developed terrible eating habits right from the get-go, and we've never learned how to balance our blood sugar. On the flip side, we also have this society of proportion exaggeration. So we go to a buffet and we pay $10 and I better get my money worth, so I got to go up 4 or 5 times. And then we're just eating way too much. And that's a problem because type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is an epidemic that's getting worse and worse. In fact, type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset, and it's not even called that anymore. It's child onset. I had a patient the other day, a 13-year-old child came in with his mom, and we did a leaky gut test to find out if he was reacting to gluten or he had intestinal permeability. He didn't. It was amazing. Actually, a little bit. He was a little bit on the moderate side, or we call it equivocal. And we did his blood work, and lo and behold, his triglycerides came in at over 250, and his cholesterol was lower than that. And so that's one of those first almost diagnostic signs that when your triglyceride levels are higher than your cholesterol levels, you have some really bad insulin resistance, and you are a pre-diabetic patient at 13 years old. And we're seeing this. And the problem is that he's not necessarily eating too many carbs. He probably is. He's probably not getting out and exercising the same way kids used to exercise when we were little and would go out till the sun goes down and come back and be going. Now we're a computer-based society and video games and text messaging and having all these problems, plus the environmental toxins. And now you have a recipe for insulin resistance. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is that I drew this diagram here. Hyperglycemia, or too much blood sugar because of too much carbs, too much absolute amount of calories, too much protein, not enough fat, not waiting for the food to sort of digest and lower in the blood sugar and then eating again. That hyperglycemia, or too much glucose, is going to lead to the same road as too little glucose, or hypoglycemia. And it's really weird. It's like, how can both those things lead to the same road? And the way that they do is that hypoglycemia is ultimately going to lead to the same road as hyperglycemia, and that is insulin resistance. And it gets there a little bit longer. It takes longer to get there when we're reactive hypoglycemia. But what happens is blood sugar falls so low that that's a stressful event. And then your adrenals will kick in and they'll secrete cortisol and say, hey, you got to get some sugar into the cells. this guy's not even eating anything. So glucose will get broken down from the messages that cortisol sends. And then what happens is that will cause insulin to raise, because we got to not only just break down glucose and put it into the bloodstream, but we also have to now usher it from the bloodstream into the cell. So what you see is you see this dance of hypoglycemia with cortisol being released, glucose going into the bloodstream, and then insulin being released and sending it into the cell. And it keeps doing that, that eventually the cells stop listening and they become insulin resistant as well. And now we're in the same problem as if we were hyperglycemia or too much glucose. And so what I tell people is you have hyperglycemia here and you have hypoglycemia down here, and in between you really have dysglycemia. And what dysglycemia means is you're on a roller coaster ride. You're waiting long periods of time, you haven't eaten, then you go eat a big meal and you release a whole bunch of insulin, and then that causes your blood sugar levels to fall, and then you may eat a big meal again, and you're doing this roller coaster ride of high blood sugar, low blood sugar, high blood sugar, low blood sugar. And as a result, now your adrenals and your pancreas and your cells and your hormones are not doing a good job. And then we get brain fog, we crash after a meal, we get shaky, lightheaded, and jittery if we haven't had a meal. We feel like we need sweets after every meal. We feel like even when we eat sweets, it doesn't relieve our cravings. If you have these things, you have dysglycemia, even if your blood tests show that they're normal. And normal could be anywhere between 85 to 99. And what's amazing is probably about a year ago, I had a patient and their blood test showed 126 and it still said normal. And that means that the lab range was like 60 to 130. So number one, it meant if you were 61 and you were 129, you were the same. Number one. Number two, you weren't even flagged with high blood sugar until you were 131. And last time I checked, in order to be diagnosed with diabetes, you need to have 126. So what that blood test was telling you is that it's normal to be diabetic. And it's not unhealthy until you get to 131. But 126, no problem. 127, no problem. Those are problems. There's a problem with this healthcare system, and we need to have a paradigm shift. And the responsibility falls on you to fix yourself. And if you are not enjoying the life that you deserve, if you are tired, if you've been nickel and dimed for going to different doctors and having to pay co-payments and deductibles, and them not listening to you, and after all those visits and all those tests and all those supplements and all those prescriptions, you're still exhausted and you're still tired, you need to take responsibility for your health, and you need to figure out how to do it yesterday. That's the mission of my mission, to help you guys. So I guess what we're trying to say is hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia lead to the same road. And more often than not, that's a little bit of both, where you have dysglycemia, where your blood sugar goes up and goes down. And one of the really big important things that I wanted to do during this Facebook Live session was I wanted to expose a big myth. And one of the big myths that just drives me crazy is that when you hear people say this all the time, I need to have 5, 6, 7 meals every, hour to hour and a half to 2 hours to control my blood sugar. That just drives me crazy. The reason that is because when you have insulin resistance, when you have dysglycemia, when you have high blood sugar or low blood sugar, and your cells are not doing a good job of letting insulin do its job and usher glucose out of the bloodstream, and you're holding more fat around the midsection, and no matter what you do, you can't exercise enough to gain that or lose that weight, and you can't go gluten-free enough, and you can't try to have 3 meals, 4 meals every 5 hours, or whatever it is. You're having 3 meals or a meal every 2 hours, and it ends up being 6 meals a day. My guess is if you actually looked at your glucose levels, like if I could just go in there and see like you're a diabetic patient and you have one of those constant monitoring systems on your glucose, we'd see your glucose go so high and never ever really come down. And here you are eating again when you said it's time to eat, and the next thing you know, your blood sugar never even was below 110, and then you spiked it again. and then you get hungry again. You don't feel satiated because no glucose got into the cell, and you have a craving again. And then your neurotransmitters go, and your dopamine and your sympathetic system goes, and you're interpreting that as you're hungry and you need food and you're hypoglycemia. Probably at this point in time, you're not hypoglycemia. You're probably hyperglycemia. So it's confusing because people are telling you you need to eat small meals more frequently. Now, what do? Do I eat small meals more frequently now, or do I not eat small meals more frequently? And the answer would be, it depends. It depends. Are you a young person who, just hasn't had enough years go by and stress go by on your body where you really are hypoglycemia, it falls and you're just crashing all the time? Or are you someone that's had hypoglycemia for a long time now, and now insulin's not even doing any job and you can't lower blood sugar, and you're interpreting that as, oh my goodness, my blood sugar is so low, I got to go eat. But if you would have taken time to look at your glucose, you would have seen it was like 110, and you're eating at that time. And guess what's happening? That's causing a huge insulin surge. And when that causes that insulin surge and you have oxidative stress and you're not able to put out inflammation, all of a sudden there's nowhere for that insulin to bind to the cell membrane, and you get tired and you have increased cholesterol and triglycerides, and you're pre-diabetic, and you think you need to eat 5 to 6 meals more frequently. So that's one paradigm shift that I want to change for you. The other paradigm shift I want to change for you is fat is not the boogeyman. Fat is healthy. You need to have fat so that you can help with your membranes, and you can help with your cholesterol and your hormone production, and you can help with your neuronal or your nerve production. All of that stuff is important, and it can also stabilize your glucose and slow down the glycemic index so that you're able to have a nice controlled glucose levels throughout the day. And actually there's studies now that show the lower your glucose is, the longer you live. Plain and simple. So anyways, what does this have to do with insomnia? So what does adrenal fatigue, hypo or hyperglycemia, or dysglycemia, where it's just up and down, what does that have to do with insomnia? So one of the first things that I'll look at is that I'll ask a patient, do you have more problem falling asleep or staying asleep? And some will be like, oh my goodness, both are bad. Okay, so both are bad. So when was the last time you did your blood test? And they'll tell me maybe a year ago. And it's like, okay, was your glucose levels good? Yeah, they're normal, perfectly normal. And so what does that mean? Are they 85 to 99? That's what I would want to know first. The other thing I'd want to know is I'd want you to fill out a metabolic assessment form where we actually ask subjective questions, which, believe it or not, are actually a better indicator of how well you're stabilizing your blood sugar versus what your glucose levels are. Because your body is so adept at compensating, and it's so adept at keeping this internal environment and keeping your glucose levels and your CO2 levels and your liver enzymes to the point where you have to be super sick for those to go out of balance. But that doesn't mean you can't still have subjective complaints of glucose problems, even though your blood tests are properly handled. I'll give you an example. The body is so amazing at compensating that, a lot of the times, and I've said this before, knock on wood, a lot of weekend warriors that get back into the gym after, taking the year off, and they go back and it's a New Year's resolution and it's time to get into shape, and they go on the treadmill and they have a heart attack and die. And I mean, that's an awful example, but how many times does that happen per year? It happens a lot. And the reason it is they do an autopsy and they look at those, coronary vessels, the ones that supply the heart, and they see that the blockages in that heart is up to 90-95%. Think about that. That means that there's 5% blood flow in that vessel that supplies oxygen and nutrients for your heart to work. And you didn't even know it until you died. You died, and that was the first symptom. And so what does that mean? It means that the body is amazingly complex at compensating for any load that you put on it. But when you exceed that load and you go and exercise and the body's not able to do that, people do that in Canada with the snow blowers and shoveling, and oh my God, that's like a flashback I don't even want to have. I couldn't stand doing that because it was so cold. And I don't know what you Canadians are thinking with that wind chill factor and how freezing it is there. But anyways, I actually get goosebumps thinking about how cold it was there. But the same thing, you're doing something that's increasing so much pressure when you shovel the snow that you have a heart attack because you're exceeding the demand. The whole point is that the body is incredibly amazing at compensating for the changes that has happened to it until eventually the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back, and you have a major stressor, you have a major injury, you get a major infection, you have an immunization, whatever that event is. You could probably look and think about the line being drawn in the sand and say, yeah, ever since I had my dental mercuries taken out, or ever since I took Cipro, or ever since I got that sinus infection, or ever since I went to Mexico and I had that, uncooked food, whatever it is, your immune system was at a point where it couldn't compensate anymore, and the stress that you imposed on it forever took a change which caused you to not be able to recover from that. So the point is that what does this have to do with insomnia? I went on a little bit of a side note there. So what does it have to do with insomnia? So think about it. If you have high blood sugar and you can't have that level go down, then that's going to be really, really difficult to fall asleep. Or if you have hypoglycemia, where you can't stabilize that glucose very well, and then your adrenals aren't kicking in when they need to because they're tired and they can't get a little bit of glucose to be broken down and put into the bloodstream, then you'll wake up in the middle of the night because your body will light up like a Christmas tree and say, hey, there's no glucose here and the cortisol's not working. So this dumb guy, you gotta make some adrenaline and make this guy have some kind of energy. And that's when you wake up all wired and you can't think properly, or you're all jacked up. That would be more of a hypoglycemia concern. So that's how that kind of relates to insulin resistance and hypoglycemia, falling asleep versus staying asleep. There's some other things. I mean, that's the other thing in life too, is I don't want you to think that there's just one mechanism of being able to explain what the problem is. There's probably 7, 10, 15 different mechanisms, and they're all a little bit contributing to the actual fact. But when you say it's this or it's that, and you put all your money on that, and you double down, and it's the wrong reason why it happened, then of course taking the chromium or taking the vitamin C, or I don't get it, I've been taking adaptogens and I took DHEA and it didn't fix it. Of course it didn't fix it. You're not even thinking about reason 8, 9, and 10, and you're thinking about reason 1, and you're looking at it from the 30,000 view feet, and you've been doing that for 3 years anyways, and it hasn't helped. So you got to look at things critically. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is talking about other reasons why we could have insomnia. So when we talk about genetic reasons, we're talking about neurotransmitters. We're talking about the excitatory neurotransmitters and the inhibitory neurotransmitters. So we'll talk about things like dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline. Those are excitatory ones. And then we'll talk about inhibitory ones like serotonin or GABA. And these are the ones that if you have a genetic predisposition for not being able to break those down, and then you're not stabilizing your glucose and you have inflammation, then you're going to steal a lot of those raw materials in the proteins that would have otherwise gone towards the hormone, the neurotransmitter production, and they go and try to fight infection or reduce inflammation. And part of the reason you have inflammation is because your blood sugar is not balanced, and you have dysglycemia, and you have insulin resistance, and you have oxidative stress, and you have free radical damage. So all of a sudden, your neurotransmitters aren't being balanced because you're stealing away the raw materials to go fight that fire. and now you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and you don't have enough money to buy your sleep neurotransmitters. Combined with the fact that you have a 23andMe test and you have an MTHFR problem, and you can't go and you can't make those proper neurotransmitter nutrients to even have enough serotonin to calm down in the first place. So there's a lot of relationships in there, and you really need to figure that out. It's not just about taking melatonin. In fact, I did a Dutch test today, and I believe the upper limits of melatonin should be 85. This person was just over 2,000, and that tells me A, they're taking way too much melatonin, B, they're not breaking it down very well, C, their rhythm is off and their cortisol and their HPA axis is not working very well, and then they go to the doctor and they say, nope, there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. So there's a lot of mechanisms, but it all traces back a lot of the times to you not stabilizing your glucose levels, and you not understanding that it's just not an adrenal fatigue problem, it's a cellular problem, it's a mitochondrial problem, it's an energy problem, and you need to fix all of those things, and not just the adrenals. You need to look at your hormones, your other hormones. You need to look at your gut health. You need to look at your liver. You need to look at your neurotransmitters. You need to look at your communication systems and your transportation systems and your elimination systems. And you need to look at your stress and how you're controlling that, and what are you doing to relax, and how are you going from one thing to the next, where when you are about to go to bed and you just finished doing 17 different emails and listening to your iPod, do they even have iPods anymore? You're listening to your podcast, and you're wanting to get healthy, but then you try to just go from 0 to 90 in one foul swoop, and you don't sleep very well, and then you want to know what's the best supplement. The best supplement is you just getting your act together and calming down and getting into a parasympathetic state, unplugging, keeping your bedroom a sanctuary, and not having Grand Central Station in there with a Wi-Fi router and your phone plugged 2 feet from your head, and wondering why you can't fall asleep, wondering why the melatonin's not working, and stuff like that. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Sarah, you're always my best cheerleader. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that. And Melinda as well, thank you for being here. If there's any questions, I would love to answer those now for you. If not, then I am going to sign off, and I am going to get into parasympathetic mode and try to unplug myself. And that's it. So I think that's it. Sarah, do you have any questions? You seem to be the only one that's interacting with me, but it's okay. I appreciate it. If you do, let me know. If not, then we will reconvene next week. If you guys can put in some suggestions for topics, I'm always excited to talk about different things. There's so much more we can get into with hypoglycemia. There's so much more we can get into with insomnia, and I can get into part 2 and part 3 and part 4. But realize that you need to take an integrative approach to this, and you need to take accountability for this, and then you need to decide that your life is much more worth living than just running from doctor to doctor, trying to figure it out when they don't really look at health the same way. So anyways, hope you guys have a great evening. I enjoyed this conversation with you guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you another day. Have a great evening.